What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Talk of the Tundra, your Green Bay Packers podcast, a proud partner of the Eurostep Podcast Network and the Blue Wire family. As always, I'm your host, Numac, and a bye-week pod. Packers coming off of a loss we really don't want to talk about anymore, but for all intents and purposes, it's bye week. We get, 10, 13 days without the Packers, so I'm ready to talk a little bit of preview of a preview, I guess, a recap of this Packer season so far with my lovely co-hosts and guests today, Jordan and Paul Bretl of Packers Wire. How are you guys doing today?
I'm doing excellent. Happy to be here with you guys talking Packers, even if we are coming off a tough one.
Happy to have Paul here. And yeah, it's a good kind of not reset, but it is after just that result and I guess the way things have been trending. It's just a good step back. And plus two, I could not remember the last time the Packers have had like a early bye.
Mm-hmm.
It's been quite a while.
I feel like they never ever get a middle bye. I think last year might have been like the first year in a while, but I remember throughout like the prime Rodgers years, we'd always get hurt early in the season and we would need a bye to get healthy for the middle stretch, and it was always like, nah, you get week 13.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's different perspectives on it, but coming off a loss like they had to the Raiders, would you rather have the bye week to be able to be like, all right, let's take a step back, let's reevaluate, or is that just one of those ones where you just want to burn the tape and like, let's just get to the next week so we can, bounce back?
I feel like for me, it's been 3-ish weeks of the offense not really performing that well. So I think this comes at a good time to actually
Good point.
to really look at what went wrong in those 3 games and try and reset to figure out, okay, what do we need to do to get this offense rolling like it did week 1 against the Bears, which it might have just been the Bears of it all. That's why they rolled. But at least they can try and figure out maybe something besides plugging in Aaron Jones.
Yeah. That's the big question.
Yeah.
So Packers are 2-3. We said it after the Raiders pod. This season could easily be 4-1. They could easily be 1-4.
Mhm.
Like there's so many I guess just ways that you can interpret what we've seen so far this season. I guess what would be your biggest reasons why the Packers are 2-3?
It's the inconsistency overall. And I think, coming into the season, we all expected that. I don't know that I expected the highs to be as high as they've been or the lows to be as low as they've been. I figured there'd be the roller coaster, but the peaks and valleys, goodness, they've been pretty great. That comeback performance against the Saints in the fourth quarter, that was an electric performance from Jordan Love. Like, numbers wise, from an efficiency standpoint, it's not like he lit it up, but in that game, he like willed them. Like in that fourth quarter, when a play had to be made, when a first down had to be picked up, when they're on the goal line at 4th and 1, like whether it was with his legs, with his arm, like he found a way. We've seen some really, really impressive throws here and there from him as well. But we all know the lows of it as well, just the overall inconsistency and I guess the concerning part right now, and we've alluded to it already, is that they're going backwards. Like the offense is going backwards from what we've seen this season. And, I do wonder what the fact that there's more tape on them now has to do with it. That was something I talked about over the summer. For any young team, that's something that you're going to have to overcome. They've put on tape now 5 games. Teams are seeing what they like to do, trying to take it away. They're seeing where they struggle, what they don't like to do, and trying to put them in those situations. And we were talking to Jordan Love last Thursday, and he mentioned that in terms of adjustments in game, those can be, difficult to make on the fly, like from play to play. And part of that difficulty is the inexperience that they have. These are my words now, but they've struggled. The young receivers have specifically with the adjustments that the defense is throwing at them. Jordan Love said the unscouted looks that they see are giving them a challenge, and in part, like, you just got to experience it. You know what I mean? Like a defense is going to make adjustments in game. They're going to throw different looks at you that you haven't seen before. And if you haven't seen it, you just haven't seen it. So part of that's the learning curve. that they're obviously experiencing right now, and I think that that's a contributor to all this. Also, over the last 2 games, the play of the offensive line has been, from a pass protection standpoint, in the run game they've been struggling all season, but pass protection has really taken a step back, and I think we're seeing the effects of that on Jordan Love. Like, look at the first 2 games. He threw 6 touchdowns, no interceptions, and we saw this throughout the summer. One of the things from training camp that I was so impressed with him by was his ability to know when to fit the ball into the tight window, when to push it downfield, and when to continue through his progression and take what was available. For a quarterback short on experience, I thought that was it's an important aspect, but I thought that it was one that would take some time to develop, especially developing that internal clock, knowing, do I have the time to go to the next read, or should I take what's available? And so I thought, from a football perspective, that was a very mature thing that we were seeing. But a product of that is having offensive line. It's having the time to do that. And the Lions game, that just absolutely did not happen. And Max Crosby, heck of a football player. He's a one-man wrecking crew on that Raiders defensive front. Like, that unit as a whole is not what the Lions have, but he on his own, one of the best edge rushers in football. And we saw him get after Jordan Love. And I thought that Raiders defensive front, they elevated their game against the Packers compared to what they had done previously. That internal clock that Love, did have established. It's changed now because he doesn't have as much time. And also, with that additional time, the receivers, who maybe have to adjust to the adjustments that the defense is making, the opponents have been playing more physical with the Packers because they're challenging them at the line of scrimmage more. That can be tough for young receivers to overcome, but that overall time that the offensive line could give Love benefits the receiver. It's additional time for them to get open as well. So I think that that's a product of this as well. The offensive line taking a step back these last 2 weeks, because all eyes are on Love, all eyes are on the receivers, but that's where success starts in the NFL, in the trenches.
Right, and that's a point that Jordan and I had over the summer and the preseason as well. Is that throughout all the preseason games, he wasn't pressured at all, and he played well, and that was one of the things that we had talked about before week 1. Is that, okay? Is he, if the pocket gets crowded, how does he gonna play? And that really didn't happen against the Bears. It didn't really happen too much against the Falcons, but come that Saints game, he was starting to get rushed a little more and having to scramble a little more, and I think we've seen the efficiency drop, and it's resulted in a few more interceptions and, just like you had said, the offense looking a little more like it's in some mud.
Yeah, spot on.
I guess go ahead, Jordan.
No, I was just gonna say, I think too, it Paul just outlined a bunch of different things, but it is there is this avalanche effect that is happening with this team, and not to we'll get the undercurrent of any question that we ask is just this team, especially on offense, is so young, and we want to see it work on all cylinders. We even in past pods we've talked about well, it looked like this in the preseason. You get to remind yourself, well, they're playing second and third stringers, right. That's part of the game. But they had the graphic during the game, and it's oh yeah, the offensive unit, the collective age is a little over 25 years old, and you just look at that, I'm that's not good. It's good in some ways, and you just want to see that ascendancy, but it's also just especially with the wide receiver core, it's that is just a young and green wide receiver core.
And it's definitely coach speak when Matt LaFleur says, all 11 players got to be better. We got to be on the same page. I got to do a better job as a play caller.
Can't stand
that's
it.
what coaches are gonna say.
Can't stand
but that's 100% the case too.
Right.
All 11 players across the board have to perform better. And the challenging part of this is the run game's not efficient. And while they're willing to take the deep ball, they're not efficient on that either.
The defense DPI is efficient.
Yeah.
The defenses really have nothing to fear against this Packers offense right now. And that just magnifies the problems. Like you said, Jordan, it's an avalanche effect right now in football. And I think in life in general, we all want to pick out all right, what's that one thing? What can we hone in on? What do we got to fix? Why was it good? Why was it bad? but that's not the case. There's a million little things that contribute to the issue. And by not being able to run the ball, by not having the deep ball, defenses are able to shrink the field. They're able to muddy up things over the middle. And, LaFleur can definitely put them in better situations to take advantage of their current skill set. But when that middle of the field's crowded, because they're not scared of getting beat over the top, like there's only so much schematically you can do. There's only so much space that these receivers can operate within right now. And I think that that's just magnifying everything and making everything that the offense is dealing with right now more challenging. This resembles a little bit to me the 2022 last season. Before Christian Watson's breakout game in week 10, he was dealing with injuries. Dobbs was dealing with injuries. The offensive line was basically playing musical chairs, each week because they were dealing with injuries. Defenses did not respect the Packers' ability to hit the deep ball. Same thing we're kind of seeing now. They're shrinking the field, condensing the field, playing closer to the line of scrimmage. And this offense didn't start to, take off, 2022 version of takeoff, until Watson emerged and showed that, we got to respect the deep ball with this team now. Things start to spread out. There's more space to operate within. That obviously helps the run game. That creates more opportunities from others within the offense. So, in looking at trying to diagnose what's going wrong with this offense, there's a lot of things. But rightfully so, we hone in on the run game, and that has to improve. Mm-hmm. But their inefficiency on the deep ball, and they're very, very willing to take it. Love, I think, is top 5 in pass attempts at 20 plus yards. But
they definitely take the shots. They're just not hitting.
No, he's got to be more accurate, and it's on the receivers too. Like, these young players from a detail point of view. Matt LaFleur talked about this on Tuesday, I think it was now. From a precision, being where you need to be and being there in the right time, making contested catches, like it's not all on Love's shoulders. The receivers have to do a better job as well. And Dobbs and Watson are in their second seasons, but between the injuries that they dealt with, like Romeo Dobbs from a snap count perspective, like maybe just be entering year 2 in that regard. You know what I mean? And
that's a good point.
I don't even know if Christian Watson's there. Christian Watson isn't there at that point if we're just looking at pure snap counts.
Right.
So still, they're the veterans in the room, but these are very, very young guys. And even as year 2 guys, like they're young in that regard as well.
Talking about the deep ball of it all, I guess, what is your opinion on the types of deep balls they're running? Because they run a lot of go routes that are just straight line, send Christian Watson as fast as he can go down the field. But I feel like that's a harder pass to make as opposed to a deep post across the middle where Jordan Love has an opportunity to lead the receiver a little further down the field rather than trying to make an over-the-shoulder throw to Christian Watson near the sideline. I guess, are you, I don't want to say comfortable because you're not a coach, but you're just like us, you're just analyzing the game. How do you feel about the types of deep balls they're throwing, and do you think that might be contributing to why they're not having as big of a success rate on those deep passes?
I mean, potentially. I think the Raiders game in particular, their usage of Christian Watson was a little bit head scratching because, like you said, it was basically just all right, head downfield. And all offseason, Matt LaFleur has talked about how he's going to see an expanded role from a route running ability. Matt LaFleur has talked about how you can plug and play him at any of the 3 receiver positions, ask him to take on any of the roles. Like, they need to do more of that with him. Like, his speed's great. Yes, he's going to be used as a vertical presence in that capacity, but to really maximize his ability, to really maximize what he can offer this offense, they got to ask more of him and put him in better situations in that regard to make plays in a variety of ways, because that's going to stress defenses as well. And we've seen Christian Watson's gravity. I mean, you can go back. There's a number of Romeo Dobbs catches over the last 14 months, going back to last season. Romeo Dobbs touchdowns where you can see the defenders lean towards what Watson's doing because of that speed. And so put him in those type of positions. And I alluded to it earlier, how things are a bit muddied up over the middle, but man, they got speed on this team. Watson, Musgrave, Reed, like explosive plays don't always have to come on 35-yard heaves downfield. Like if they can find a way to get them the ball over the middle in space, let their yak take over, that's a big way to help generate plays as well. And that was also one of the confusing parts. Like Luke Musgrave had 7 targets against the Raiders, which is fantastic. We need more of that. But I think his average depth of target was like 4 or 5 yards from the line of
horrible.
scrimmage.
It was horrible.
Pure check down like passes. And
Yeah.
I looked at Jordan Love's passing chart, and again, like this might veer into just like Jordan Love, like where he is at. And granted, this is his 5th start of his first full year as a starter, but it's like you take away that middle of the field, and we saw like how it looked. The Packers put up 13 points. There's no just and the irony is those are the throws that he can make really well. And when you take that away, it's like and that's where the offense is at like right now. It's so weird.
That was the part of that game that really confused me the most, because like I said, Love came into that game ranked top 5 in passes of 20 plus yards, in passes of 10 to 19 yards in terms of pass attempts. But it felt like the game plan was almost like handcuffing that a little bit.
Yeah.
Through most of definitely the first half and most of the first 3 quarters of the game. And then by the time it got to the 4th quarter, those heaves felt like heaves, kind of quarterback's impatient. We're behind. Things aren't going well. Let's try to get a spark and chuck it downfield. And again, is that a product of, all right, we're throwing it downfield a ton. We're not very efficient. Let's just emphasize, all right, let's get the 7-8 yards. Let's get the 10-11 yards, take it and just try to plot the ball down the field. Was it, Aaron Jones not being in there? His, Matt LaFleur said it was Saturday where the hamstring kind of popped up a little bit again. And, you can't scrap the game plan at that point. That's too close to game time. And it might not have even been till Sunday, or who knows, Monday morning when they're like, all right, he can't go. Like, not expecting LaFleur to come up with a whole new game plan at that point. But, was that a reason why we saw more of those short passes? Like, I think that's why Patrick Taylor had more targets at halftime than Watson and Dobbs did. I think those were plays designed for Aaron Jones. And again, you got to make quicker adjustments, but also too, like from a time frame standpoint, there's only so much you can do. So was that a reason why? Going back to the offensive line, they just can't, like we said, they got bullied by Detroit. You're going up against Max Crosby. Is it, hey, let's just emphasize the shorter passes, get the ball out of Love's hands? Like, it could be any of that. It could be a number of other factors, but that part of the game, just watching that offense from a passing game perspective, it was like, this is not what we've seen through the start of the season. And they looked uncomfortable. Like, Love looked uncomfortable back there. And those deep ball passes, like I said, they felt so forced for the most part.
I feel like they need to. I talked about this on the post game pod, but they really should be treating some of these more recent starts against like the Saints, the Lions, and the Raiders. When he's struggling, they should really start using him like Jimmy G and getting him to throw on his 5-step drop back foot goes down, throw it. Like, just get the ball out quickly to get some momentum going on these throws and make these routes more simplistic for him to really utilize the rest of his game and the rest of the offense positively. Get the short throws over the middle, like you were saying. I've been hammering the point home all year and all last year. Just throw it over the middle. Like, I know it's hard when they don't have a deep ball threat, but getting something over the middle is relatively a simple concept to implement, right? There's motion you can do to really sort of open that up a little bit, but I don't think they had a whole lot of targets over the middle from the Raiders game on Sunday. Like, the passing chart was 5 yards from the line of scrimmage and then deep balls. And yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that too would benefit everyone, because there's definitely some plays where, like, they're not doing the little things right now. So we can't be expecting to go deeper into the playbook, diving into, deeper concepts within the offense if we can't do the little things right. Like that running play for Christian Watson that he had. Like, we're struggling, they were running, and it kind of tells us the state of the run game. Like, A.J. Dillon averaged 3.8 yards per rush, and we got through the game, and it's like, all right, they were solid in that area. Like, that kind of tells us the state of the run game. But for the most of the season, like, even those type of up the middle plays, inside zone, outside zone plays, core fundamental aspects of the LaFleur offense, like, they've been struggling to execute that. So introducing a play where we now need 6-7 blockers to execute it perfectly to get Watson to the line of scrimmage, like, that's just asking too much for what this group can do right now. or that one handoff to Patrick Taylor. Like, you're asking Tucker Kraft after the snap to come across the formation to block Max Crosby. Like,
Just not a good idea.
that's not going to work. Like, there's zero chance of that working. So I think just simplifying everything. I think like we talked about at the start, the timing of the bye week where that can be valuable is, all right, in sports in general, you're off, you're struggling. Doesn't matter what the sport is. What do you do? Fundamentals. Go back to the basics. Go back to the basics of the Matt LaFleur offense. What are we trying to accomplish? What are we trying to do? Let's make sure we're executing on those concepts properly, paying attention to the details, and get those down. And then from there, we can build it out. Because, one of the benefits of the Shanahan LaFleur system is, it's like LaFleur's talked about, the illusion of complexity. It's simple concepts from the offense's perspective, but they're confusing, keeps the defense off balance because you're throwing so much at them. It's when he talks about the illusion of complexity, it's running a variety of plays from just a few personnel packages because you have versatile players who can do a number of roles, so defenses aren't able to substitute. You're able to create mismatches. It's also running plays that look similar but actually end up completely different. And then you have motion in there as well, so the defense is making last-second adjustments. So the defense is tipping its hand with those adjustments and what they might be doing, creating mismatches. Like, they're just all out of whack because if some of the things we talked about is what feel like could be solutions, and obviously it goes much greater than what our discussion is, but a lot of that's core Matt LaFleur offense concepts. And that's why I think this bye week give them the opportunity to kind of hit the reset button a little bit and go back to, all right, here's what we do well. Let's go out and do that.
To that point, I think football is just a very emotional sport, especially playing it. Definitely be a fan. It's been interesting how I've viewed reaction to LaFleur criticism or commentary and stuff like that. And we all know, again, this is a young Packers team. It's a really young Packers team that hangs over everything that we talk about this season, where they go forward from here, because it's year 5 for LaFleur, but it's essentially the slate was wiped clean. So I guess where I kind of fall on this right now, until something drastically changes, is that he is a very, very accomplished coach, very good. But I think when we talk, or the idea of like we're going to see Matt LaFleur's system, which is kind of a lie. We have seen it for the last 4 years. The difference is that there's new players playing that and having to operate within that system, and they're all young. They're rookies or a fourth-year quarterback who's starting for the first time as a full-time starter. Like, I think long question, try to make it shorter, is what Matt LaFleur wants to run, can that be run by a team as young as the Green Bay Packers? That's where I'm kind of like where I'm at through 5 weeks, and we won't know the answer to this question until they get better or worse or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think for the reasons that I mentioned, that it absolutely can be. I think, again, the execution has to be better. The blocking, the ability to move the ball on the ground, the detail from the receivers, loves accuracy, all that stuff. Like, LaFleur went into pretty good detail about all of that on Tuesday, and that it's the details. And again, he's always really, really good about holding himself accountable and things that he has to do better, and he absolutely did that. But he's right as well. It's the detail side of things. And from the defensive perspective, yeah, Joe Barry has to do a better job of putting them in better positions with play calls. But like that Lions game too, like guys weren't getting off blocks. There were running lanes that weren't being filled. There were missed tackles. Like, again, it's not to absolve Joe Barry or anything like that, but it's everyone. Again, it goes back to the thing of it's not one person. It's not, one specific thing that if that one thing gets fixed, obviously some things will have a greater impact if they get fixed over others, but it's really everything right now. And like I said, going back to the core of this Matt LaFleur offense, that illusion of complexity that he talks about, again, that's meant for simplistic, relatively speaking, of course, designs for the offense to be able to go out and execute, but can still be challenging for the defense to decipher what's taking place.
Yeah, sometimes it just feels like the illusion of complexity gets too complex sometimes. Like sometimes I just want to see a crossing route over the middle, and like just dump it off to Jaden Reed going over the middle and see if he can, like you said, make the yak work for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm obviously there needs to be motion ahead of the snap because that's just what his offense entails. But I think I just want to see more quick throws, and that hopefully that helps more. But I guess on the flip side of the offensive side of the ball, the running game, AJ Dillon having to be sort of the bell cow back for the majority of the season so far with Aaron Jones's injury. Like you said, kind of bounced back on on one day against the Raiders with like 78 yards on 20 carries or something. I guess for you, or I guess how do you think the Packers run game can improve if like Aaron Jones isn't getting healthy sometime soon? Like hamstrings are notoriously finicky, and if this latest aggravation of his injury keeps him out longer than the Broncos game now, it's still going to be AJ Dillon and I guess now Emmanuel Wilson since they cut Patrick Taylor. So like I was Emmanuel Wilson stan through the preseason. He was my darling this year, and they haven't used him. But then they signed Patrick Taylor because of Aaron Jones' injury. Quay gets hurt, so they bring back Justin Hollins, and it's a lot of mixing and matching of who's going to be on the roster. And I don't fully understand, this is getting into a different tangent, of why they would have kept Emmanuel Wilson over Patrick Taylor if they're not going to use Emmanuel Wilson when Patrick Taylor wasn't active. That is all to say, how do you think the running game can improve with these players that aren't Aaron Jones right now? I guess is it more so a line issue where holes just aren't becoming open for AJ Dillon, or is it really just the unfortunate reality of all that maybe AJ Dillon just isn't that guy to be the number one back?
I mean, sticking with the theme of our conversation so far, it's been both. So I think the fact that Elton Jenkins is back and this line is like, this is their preferred five. I mentioned that on Twitter, like, oh, the offensive line's at full strength. And I got a bunch of replies that are like, no, it's not. And it's like, well, yeah, it is. This is their five. This is who they're working with right now. Like, this is full strength. Might not like it, but that's full strength right now.
Right.
But anyways, that's going to go a long way. And I think it's an overlooked aspect of offensive line play, but continuity is so important. Having the same guys next to each other week in and week out in practice each day is a really important aspect of it. And like I said, looking back at 2022, a lot of the issues early on in the season that this group faced was because of injuries to the offensive line. So I think just having Jenkins back, knowing that, all right, here's our five right now. Zach Tom, presumably he's played the last 2 weeks, getting healthy or is healthy as well. Rasheed Walker is getting more experience. I mean, he was basically a red shirt last season as a rookie. So, I mean, that in itself is an important aspect of it. AJ Dillon, what I really liked about Monday's game was he was decisive and he was physical. So we've had the opportunity to talk to running backs coach Ben Sermons twice this season so far, or once in season and one just before the season began. And there's a couple things with Dillon that they've been this whole off season for AJ Dillon was about emphasizing on running with a low pad level. And I asked AJ Dillon in the locker room, how do you go about emphasizing that? And it's as it sounds, you want low man in football wins, but for him, a lot of it was a mindset. Last season he said, he was almost trying to be too perfect. And do everything precisely and as accurately as he had to, rather than this season he said his mindset is being physical and going into that playing with a low pad level. And I felt like that's what we saw in this last game. He was decisive. There was that one run when they were close to the goal line on that touchdown drive where he just put his foot in the ground, planted, cut back.
Yes.
Like we hadn't seen that before. Like the vision hasn't been there. The burst hasn't been there. Like there's definitely been, it looks like overthinking. And again, in our most recent conversation with Ben Sermons, that's what he talked about. He says AJ Dillon just needs to go out there and play free. If he goes out there and plays free, not overthinking, his nat, and it's not just Dylan, but every athlete, any sport, that's what you want to do. You just want to go out there, know that you've put in the practice time, and just let your natural abilities take over. And I felt like that's what we really saw in that Raiders game. So for Dylan's side of things, that's the most encouraging part of it. And now it's just continuing to build upon that. So to answer the question, obviously offensive line being healthy, that continuity, Dylan running in that capacity, because man, there's such a trickle down effect. Like the inability to pick up first downs, or excuse me, move the ball on first downs, just sets the entire offense back. Now you're in an obvious passing situation. The defensive front's able to pin its ears back and just go boom, point A to point B and go get you, because they know you're passing on 2nd and 10. Jordan Love's completion percentage on second downs, this was before the Raiders game, was 46% this season. In part, that's a product of overall he's struggling with accuracy. But when you're in obvious passing situations, that's incredibly disadvantageous for you. And again, before the Raiders game, on 3rd and 4 or less, the Packers moved the chains 75% of the time. On 3rd and 5 or more, they only moved it on 28%. So you can see just the massive trickle-down effect that has when you're not able to find success on early downs. And oftentimes that includes the run game, because that's mostly, when you're running, unless, of course, you're in like 3rd and 1, 2, whatever it is. But that need to get it going is incredibly important. And I think part of the reason, too, why we've seen them push the ball downfield is because that's what defenses want them to do. They've faced a lot of loaded boxes, which is contributing, to just making running more difficult. So going back to what we talked about at the start, ability to go over the top, help space things out, being able to hit on those passes is going to play a factor as well. And moving the ball, even if it's the passing game, and being in like a 2nd and 5, because now the defense, they can't just pin their ears back. They got to play both the run and the pass. So that can help the run game. So, and I mean, obviously having Aaron Jones back as well, look at that Bears game. Jones averaged 4.6 yards per rush. It's not like running lanes were magically there for Jones and haven't been there for Dylan. That's just his ability. He's so good at just seeing running lanes, but getting small and just navigating through them as well, even when they're not there. So, I mean, it goes without saying what just having him back in the mix will do for this team. But I think all of those are going to be important factors for them in terms of having success. And then if you can do that, the passing game opens up, play action opens up. There's just so many other things that this offense can do if they're able to, again, and it doesn't have to. Monday was a great example of this. These don't have to be 7, 8, 10-yard runs. Dylan was didn't even average 4 yards per rush, but it kept him ahead of the sticks. It put him in advantageous passing situations. If you're getting 4 yards a rush, you can work with that as an offense.
That's a first down every 3 times.
I was going to say, that's exactly what it is.
2 things that you had touched on. Mentioning Ben Serwins was focusing on having AJ Dillon run with his shoulder pads low. I guess that makes sense as to my observation of it. Looks like he's falling down all the time. Not literally falling down through the line of scrimmage. It looks like when he's running, he's about to fall over. But that makes sense if he's trying to get his shoulders lower and just run with a little more force like that. So I guess thank you for that insight. But talking about, go ahead.
I was just going to say that in the Falcons game, what was it, that 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, where he stumbled before even getting to the line of scrimmage. He said afterwards, because he was running behind Royce Newman and Newman was beat. I think Dylan said something to the effect of that, he kind of saw what was unfolding on the offensive line and was basically getting ready to, all right, I'm going to have to fight through this, and just got all out of balance, out of whack, and
pulling the chair in basketball kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
But also talking about just having success on first down, running the ball. Arjun Menon on Twitter, this was sent to our Discord channel today, of the percent series of downs that teams have gone run, drop back in the offense. So run, play, and then just obvious pass play. And the Packers are at nearly 10% of all their series doing that, which is eyeballing about 10th in the league. I guess that's where I really want to see the mix-ups from LaFleur's offense come in. If there's one thing that I don't like as a fan and as a just football fan in general, it's that if it's run, drop back, that's it's predictable. Like it's predictable every single time. I want to see a bigger mix up of what you're doing in your order of play calling, in your cadence, and like get some hurry up going too. Like try and get some momentum and get these guys off balance.
Tempo.
Right, get some tempo going, momentum going for the offense, but get the defense off their I guess had not letting them catch their breath essentially, and get them
Or
off
sub.
balance. Right, exactly, and just start running, like not literally running the ball, but just start moving the ball faster and faster, and that's when you get those mistakes. Like that was, maybe I'm wrong, but part of the 2011 offense was just how fast they would go sometimes. Go, 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 go. And then you hard count it, get them to go offside. There's your play, and Rodgers down the field. And I feel like now it's been the latter Rodgers years, and even now with Jordan Love, is they're running the play clock down to 0. And I that's a analysis and a personal preference type of like what type of offense you should run. But yeah, I feel like you just need to save some time and not be running that clock down to 0 and pick it up a little bit.
Yeah, in the Saints game and the Lions game, like when they found the large chunk of their success on offense, it was in 2-minute mode. And
Right.
we didn't see that against the Raiders. Like they didn't pull that out of their back pocket as like, all right, we got to try to get something going here. This has worked for us. Let's see if we can lean on this a little bit. And Matt LaFleur said, I think it was after the Lions game, something to the effect of that they want to have the hurry up the 2-minute offense as a tool in their tool belt. And this is my wording, but it's not something that they want to be able to, that they feel like they have to lean on either. Because in terms of, over the course of an entire game, I just think from a sustainability standpoint and playing that quick, and you want to have, other, concepts that you can lean on throughout the game, so to speak, rather than that 2-minute. So I do wonder if, trying to establish in other factors, but yeah, because that, like I said, the Saints game, the Lions game, when they were able to move the ball, that was that was the spark for them.
Right.
But we didn't see that against the Raiders.
I don't even think it has to be like 2-minute short throws, go, 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 go. Just mix in those type of plays into the regular offense. You should be able to, or maybe I'm naive for thinking this, in a drive, you should be able to switch from a hurry up type of offense and the play calling you're going to then a more methodical, surgical breakdown of the defense. Just that's where my brain goes. It's like give them the switch ups, give them the mix ups to keep them on their toes when it comes to what they need to defend. Because at one point, if you're getting 3-4 plays in a row on a set of downs that are quick and they're moving, you can't get subs in. And then the second you get that first down, taking it more methodical, sub in, and then take a shot downfield, or one of your bigger plays that you have, as long as it's not a freaking option pitch play. I'm sick of seeing that.
Or a screen that they can't seem to get going either.
Right. It's like all the
tough.
Yeah.
Defense. We gotta talk about defense.
We gotta
Even though
talk
the
about
offense
defense.
is the biggest, the offense stuff and like just the overall progress of it is really concerning at this point. It can change. Defense is always gonna be. It's Joe Barry is just gonna light up Twitter every time, and it's like I don't know, whatever. But going into this year and how I guess this is even last year just because expectations are just so high for that unit. Now that we kind of like this, the familiar beats echo, whether it's Joe Barry, Mike Pettin, Dom Capers, it goes on and on for a long time. The Packers can get gassed in the run game by a very explosive running back unit. Or they can have a game like against the Raiders, where, as we talked about last pod, if you told me that they limited them to 17 points, I'm like, that's a win. Like there is enough talent there, and Rashawn Gary is only playing like maybe half the snaps, where this defense can keep them in games, and largely they have, except if you want to throw out the Lions game. I guess. From your perspective of it all, like where do you think this defense stands in terms of just like the positives or just the overall state of things, even with knowing that Joe Barry is always going to be target number one, whether we know what we're talking about or not.
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the biggest positives from just the Raiders game we'll start with is just we did see changes. Like Matt LaFleur said after the Lions game, we got to have a philosophical change, was his words. We can't be so rigid sitting in that shell coverage that Joe Barry loves to sit in. And we saw that. There were more guys playing closer to the line of scrimmage that helped against the run. Jimmy G loves over the middle. He loves underneath throws. That helps muddy things up in that regard. With Devontae Adams, they defended him pretty similarly to what they did Justin Jefferson in Week 17 last year, where it's not as if Jair was on Devontae for a ton of the snaps, but whatever side of the field Devontae was on, a safety was basically right over the top of the cornerback, essentially with double coverage. And man, you hold Devontae Adams to 4 receptions for 45 yards, like that's a win. So from an adjustment standpoint, that was great to see because the defense has been slow to do that. Now the question is, and history says, probably don't get your hopes on this. Like, are they going to continue that? Are they going to, continue to do that as the weeks go on? Because they always seem to kind of trend back towards, what's comfortable, for Joe Barry, and it's trying to take away those big passing plays. But I think it was a chart from PFF before the Monday night game, and the Packers were like, their defense was like top 10 in like explosive plays given up. So it's not even like they were, doing well in that regard. Do they give up, the 40, 50 yard play downfield? No, but they give up 10-yard runs, which is considered an explosive play. And because they play with so much cushion, guys get the ball and pick up 20 yards, through the passing game. So it's not even necessarily it just feels like it doesn't have to be one or the other. Like you can play cover 2, but still, play closer to the line of scrimmage. Cover 2 shell coverage, trying to take away the big passing play. Doesn't have to be safeties, deep, cornerback 7-8 yards off the receiver. Like it can be this combination.
I need you to tell that to Joe Barry. That has been Jordan can attest. This is my bugaboo. Every time I feel like I look at a cornerback, whether it be Jair, Keyshawn, or Razul, they're 10 yards off the receiver. And like it drives me absolutely insane that they give such talented wide receivers free breaks on their routes. Like I told Jordan,
it doesn't even have to be a talent. I mean, all NFL players are talented. Right. Let me just be clear. But like a Jacoby Myers who profited off of all the attention that Devontae Adams was given, like that happens. And I think to your point where it's like you see the adjustment being made, you see how it jump-started the late season rally last year, and then going back to what's comfortable.
Right.
I think that's where we could cross sports here too, because it's how it was under Bud with the Bucks, and I love Mike Budenholzer and everything like that. But like, coaches stick with what's comfortable because, it's a little different with Bud and the Bucks when they were like a top tier defense. But like with Joe Barry, you just see the talent at their disposal, even with injuries this year, and last year too. But you just see what is at his disposal, and you think that should be a better defense than be middle of the pack.
Mm-hmm. And I'll say this because I started it earlier too. And again, not absolving Joe Barry, but the players have to be better too. Like over the summer, Jair Alexander said that new cornerbacks coach Greg Williams, they were working on his spacing at the line of scrimmage and how far off he's playing with receivers. Because Jair said he has a tendency to back too far off. So there is that balance of, and we don't know the answers, to like, is Joe Barry, I'm definitely sure there's instances where Barry wants them in that position, but are the cornerbacks doing a little ad-libbing on their own as well? So
why do you think that is that, like a player of Jair's like talent? Like Jair's not slow. He might be a little small at 5'10", as opposed to like some of the bigger wide receivers in the league, but you have to assume that Jair wants to be up in their face, breaking them at the line of scrimmage and not allowing them to get clean breaks off. Like, am I wrong in thinking like that playing up close is better to do most of the time. Like I understand that if you have Christian Watson on the on the outside, you shouldn't be at the line of scrimmage with him because he can blow right past you. But not every player has 4.2 speed, 4.3 speed like Christian Watson does.
Yeah, that's a great question. If I had to guess, this is just my own guess. Maybe he wants the quarterback to throw the ball his way. You know what I mean?
Maybe.
Like
Yeah, trying
maybe
to goad him in
maybe it's
into
a bait, bait the ball, bait him in a little bit. You know what I mean? Like, oh,
Yeah.
there's an opening because he wants to make the play on the ball just like every cornerback does.
Right.
So I don't know. That's just my random guess at what it could be, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure. But like I said, I just wanted to provide that because there is that context to it where, that's something that, he's working on because he just says naturally kind of tends to fall back sometimes. But to the point, the players got to be better as well. Like the pressure this season outside of Rashawn Gary, like has not been consistent. Even the Raiders game, like they came up with 3 big third down sacks, but PFF had Garoppolo pressured on just 25% of his dropbacks. For some context, if that was like over the course of the season among all quarterbacks, that ranks 33rd in football. And they were even sending some blitzes. I think Eric Wilson was on one. I know Savage was on one. Like they weren't getting home, and the blitzes in general this season have been really hit and miss for this Packers team. But outside of Rashawn Gary, there hasn't been someone who's been able to provide consistent pressure on the quarterback. So it's definitely, again, an area where they got to improve the run defense, as we all know. And I think that run defense does play a factor in the pass rush perspective of it. Is like we talked about, if the offense is ahead of the sticks and they're in 2nd and 3, like as a edge rush, you can't pin your ears back and just go get the quarterback because they might run the ball on you. So that takes away a little of the bite of the pass rush. They've also played quarterbacks who do a really good job of getting the ball out of their hands quickly. So obviously tougher to get home when there's less time to get there. So I think all those are contributing factors as well to some of the lack of consistency from the pass rush. But I think, like I said, the promising aspect of Monday's performance, and there are certainly areas that had to get better. Like I just mentioned, the pressure perspective, there were still, instances where from a personnel standpoint or what was dialed up, like I think it was Jacoby Myers who caught the touchdown on the slant, and Rudy Ford had his feet in the end zone.
Oh boy,
like, just a ton of space underneath.
Oh, it drives me insane, Paul. It drives me insane.
The slant that Devontae caught, I think inside the 5. I can't remember if he got in the end zone or not.
It was Keyshawn Nixon, yeah.
Yeah, and man, you saw Rasul Douglas after that play. Like he knew what was coming, and they just wasn't in position for whatever reason to make a play on the ball. So slants, screens, the Raiders found some success on in that game. So of course, there's definitely areas that they have to improve upon. But at the end of the day, and they aren't going up against lightning offenses by any means, but there's 3 games from the defensive perspective. Like the Packers should be 3-2. They win the Bears game, won the Saints game, and from what the defense did, only allowing, the defense actually only gave up 14 points. The offense spotted the Raiders 3 with that turnover. Like Matt LaFleur said after, you hold a team to 14 points defensively, like you got to win those games in the NFL. So far from perfect.
Even the Falcons game too, like 25 isn't a like a huge score to put up, and they fell apart.
Mm-hmm. And I think the defense is hurting as well from the offensive struggles. Like the prime example of what complimentary football or a lack of complimentary football looks like is that 4th quarter of the Falcons game.
Yeah.
Packers had 3 possessions, ran 11 plays, totaled 3 minutes on the clock. That was it. Defense was out there for 12 minutes. And the defense obviously didn't help itself either by letting the Falcons run all over them. But in that Falcons game and Lions game where the offense really struggled and the defense couldn't stop the run, the average time of possession difference in that game was the Packers trailed by 15 minutes in that category. The Lions and Falcons ran on average between the two of them 25 more plays than what the Packers did. Like, you're not winning games doing that. It's just, and if you do,
volume game.
Stole it.
Yeah. So we're there's a lot of gripes obviously where we are. This team should be better. They have an even point differential, so it's just like using that as like a factor of just like where this team could be. I guess if we want to take a more optimistic note of where this Packers team is through 5 games, what do you look at as areas of just being like, I think they could kind of steady the ship coming out of the bye based on this, or this?
Mm-hmm. I think reasons for optimism, Rashawn Gary's play. I mean, his pressure rate, I didn't look at it specifically after the Raiders game, but 33% of the time he was creating pressure, 1 out of every 3 snaps. And coming off an ACL injury, like you don't necessarily know. We can't make the assumption of what version of him we're going to see, but he came back and immediately was at least at the level of last year, and it has exceeded that. So that in itself is a huge victory. His snap count increased against the Raiders game, so that's exciting. Anders Carlson, I mean, who knew what the heck to expect?
We got the better Carlson.
Yeah.
Wilson was my darling. Anders Carlson was Jordan's darling all through camp.
You know what? I'm sorry. I know you're mid-answer, but I was just like, your work, everybody, boots on the ground. We love it. But I was also just like, it is training camp. Just let's get this kid a break. you obviously too, it's different. I think every time I look at every practice day, I was like, oh, it's really windy. Oh, it's 90 degrees, and you're just sweltering. And I'm like, I'm gonna have, it's a leap of faith. That's what I had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he hasn't missed this year. Field goals or extra points, and I had this thought during the preseason, because for the Bengals game, I think he missed a couple extra points, but was fairly steady in preseason games. And after the draft, Rich Bisaccia, and talking about him, there's 2 things that stood out. He talked about his big game experience from his time at Auburn and his mental makeup. And the mental makeup aspect of it, we saw throughout training camp, because it didn't matter if he went 1 for 6, he would bounce back with a 6 for 6. And I think that, to me, that's what that represents, that bounce back ability to shake off when things aren't going well and just continue, chopping wood, 1 foot in front of the other and keep going. But also those 2 qualities, what he's shown so far is he's a gamer. His worst performances that we've seen have been in practice when no one's around, other than, obviously the fans at training camp, reporters on the sidelines. But that's where his worst performances have been. There is something to it. He's shown up to this point that, because I think, if I'm remembering correctly, he had a 1 for 6 performance in practice, or 2 for 6. And then the next practice was family night, first time in Lambeau Field, sold out crowd. And we're like, what's going to happen here? And he was perfect. So that was kind of my first inkling of, okay, there's the bounce back ability, but he's just got gamer in him. There's something about it and that's what you want in a kicker, right?
Yeah.
The lights are on, and he's stepped up to this point. So incredibly encouraging. Other reasons for optimism, I mean, the Packers schedule, it's not that daunting. Looking ahead, and it's the NFL. We can't assume anything in terms of wins, but it's not this, super, at least based on what we've seen up to this point in the season. It's not like they have these super, challenging opponents, or a ton of them, I should say, coming in. Another reason I wrote down was they're getting healthy, hopefully. Christian Watson back in the mix. We just talked about the offensive line. Hopefully Aaron Jones is ready for the Denver game, and anything can happen. Obviously, sounds like he was expected to play, and then Saturday happened. But I have to think too that with their recent move with Patrick Taylor, releasing him, and not knowing if they're going to sign him back to the practice squad, because my understanding from what I saw on Twitter is that even though he's released, his elevations don't reset.
I was going to say that it doesn't reset. It's not like
just gaming the system.
Yeah, because it's in baseball, when your options run out, I think
they're out.
They're
right.
done. Yeah.
So they don't have that ability to, now we can elevate him 3 times again.
Right.
And in terms of roster space, Eric Stokes is going to come off PUP, it has to be in the next Has to be in the next 2 weeks. Like that's the deadline.
Yep.
Yeah.
Luke Tenuta's on IR. If they want additional offensive tackle depth without Bakhtiari, like he's going to have to be added back at some point. So again, tried to read the tea leaves. Anything can happen injury wise, as we all know. But like, hopefully that's a good sign that they're like, all right, with the bye week, we'll have Aaron Jones for the Denver game. So getting healthy, because Jordan Love still has not had his full complement of skill position players plus the preferred five on the offensive line. And again, I emphasize the word preferred five because that's what we're working with right now without Bakhtiari. But he still has not had that, because when Jones and Watson were playing against the Lions, they didn't have Elton Jenkins. This time they had their full five on the offensive line. They didn't have Aaron Jones. So still has not had that combination yet this season. And then just a few players. Razul Douglas has looked really, really,
really good. Really, really
There's been some hiccups here and there, but man, he's playing at a really high level, and his leadership, like his study habits, like you see that, you feel that, like that. I think it was third, fourth and goal, where I think it was Ritter who ran it in, and in part because Rashawn Gary crashed in so hard. Like Razul Douglas was all over him. The Keyshawn Nixon play we referenced earlier, like that's someone who is fully aware of not only, all right, here's what my job is, but here's what everyone's job is around me. That double move that Amon-Ra St. Brown ran against him again in the Lions game, that was that wide open touchdown.
Oh yeah.
Razul said after the game that he spoke with Jared Goff, and they knew from watching film. Okay, let me try to word this the right way. They knew that Razul Douglas watches so much film that he knew they were going to run that route, or the initial route before the double move, and jump it, because the Lions put that route on tape so much, and they know he watches tape so much that he was going to do that. So that was their counter to it. So to his, that's a bit of a compliment. You know what I mean? If how I explained that made sense.
No, yeah.
Yeah, it's like we burned you, but we knew that we had to burn you based on, your knowledge and intelligence.
Exactly.
They developed an entire play based on knowing what his tendencies were pregame.
Yep. And his tendency was that because they knew he was going to be in the film and studying what they do. So long story short, again, just outside of the play itself, but just the work ethic, the leadership that he brings, excellent. And then Romeo Doubs, quiet game against the Raiders, but he's been a reliable target for Jordan Love this season for the most part. So with so much uncertainty or ups and downs at the receiver position, obviously incredibly valuable to have.
I think that the work that Jordan Love and Romeo Doubs did in the offseason is really showing itself now in the regular season, because I think the timing is a little off between Love and Christian Watson, and that's why he hasn't been mixed in so much, I guess, seemingly from just a fan perspective in the games where he's had any sort of impact. It's just not a lot of targets and things like that. But with Romeo Doubs, it seems like they have a lot of timing just down to basically being it like they're just talking to each other in their heads. Like everything's on a time. It's the passes are there on time, and the only mistakes have come on seldom long throws where it was dropped, or the short drop that Romeo Doubs had last week, on Monday,
or
where
the
he
pick,
during
the Lions game, where I think even Doubs was pretty kind of emotional after that.
Yeah,
but
animated.
To your point, you see in the red zone, that's where stuff like that happens, where he just gets a simple release off the line. And I say simple just because it looks simple, but that chemistry between those two players, even with where they are in their careers, is just very palpable.
Yeah, that back shoulder in the Saints game that gave the Packers the lead, that's rapport. That type of throw, that's we saw 12 and 17 connecting on those type of passes, quite often here in Green Bay.
Right, but that's what makes me what makes me excited about that pairing going forward, is that's only going to get better. My only hope is that it gets better with Christian Watson too, because if you have that type of rapport with both your 1 and your 2, you're going to be sitting pretty. It's just, again, like you'd mentioned way earlier, they're not full seasons into their NFL career yet based on snap count. They're still growing, they're still learning, and I think that's something that we just have to have that perspective on as fans, because it's easy to be like, He's been around for a year and a quarter now. Like Christian
Mm-hmm.
Watson should know what he's doing. He should be starting to really produce as an NFL wide receiver. No, like that's what I forget. It might have been Matt or who wrote the oh no, it was the Raiders. I think athletic writer that wrote the Devontae piece before Monday's game. I forget who wrote it. Anyways, they were talking about how Aaron Jones and Jair Alexander really told Devontae to work at his game, or I guess other way around. Devontae was coaching Aaron Jones, but the point being, Devontae didn't become Devontae year 2. It was year 3, year 4, year 5 until he really started to become an all-pro wide receiver. I think we've had our expectations set a little too high as to receiver play around the Packers after coming away from 9-10 years as Devontae Adams.
I think that's fair.
For you, given the expectations of it all, because I've tried to drill it into my brain and I'm struggling to do so, that this year is gravy. This year, next year are gravy. Anything that happens, it's if we win a whole bunch, hip hip hooray, we love winning. If we're losing a bunch, it's supposed to happen. We're a young team, and it's just part of the transition from an Aaron Rodgers-led offense to now Jordan Love. How would you think the expectations, or I guess, what should the expectations be for fans for the rest of the year? Because we're sitting at 2 and 3, like you said. The schedule isn't the hardest. That's where I drank the Kool-Aid preseason. I was like, a lot of these teams suck. We might go like 12 and 5.
There's a playoff team.
Yeah, 11 and 6. Like I was thinking, I could see us winning the division quite easily and handedly. No, there's a lot of nuance to these kids or these rookies and just the young players on the team, not kids obviously. But I guess how do you think we as fans should be setting our expectations for the rest of the season?
I know it's hard, but we got to throw wins and losses out the window. We got to see progress. Packers want to win games, of course. It's what they're trying to do every Sunday. Hopefully they win, many more this season. But the goal number 1 of this year is to figure out, is Jordan Love the guy?
Right.
Because the worst thing that can happen next offseason isn't having a top 5 pick and saying, all right, we need our quarterback. The worst thing that can happen is going, maybe.
Yeah.
And then you live in this kind of in between of, are we extending him? Is he going to play out on his last year? Do we give him another shot? Like, we got the 13th pick. Are we taking someone? Like, that's the worst case scenario. We cannot be stuck in, no man's land and wondering. So, obviously it's still a long ways to go. And we've seen the flashes of, all right, this is someone who can be your guy. And when I say be your guy, I don't mean Hall of Fame quarterback, but like someone that you can build a team around and say, all right, if we get the right guys around him, we're going to go win some games. We've seen those, like I said, we saw it throughout training camp. Like there would be these passes where he's throwing guys open. He's putting the ball where it doesn't matter what the cornerback does, where the cornerback is. Like that takes the offense to a new level when you have that type of player that at the quarterback position. Matt LaFleur has used the word poise a ton to describe him, and that ability to lead the team back. Like I was so impressed with that Saints game, so impressed because nothing had gone right. You know what I mean? It wasn't this shootout where the offense is finding a lot of success. They're down 8 in the fourth quarter, leads a game-winning drive. You know what I mean? Like it was, things were going so bad, and just his ability to shake it off. And like I talked about earlier, just will that team. Something had to be done in that fourth quarter. Jordan Love found a way. So those aspects of it, you are like, all right, we could build around that. Now what they need to figure out is, where's the floor exactly with him? What's the ceiling look like? Because right now it's kind of this, it's an elevator. We're not sure where we're going right now. We've seen glimpses. We've seen glimpses of
after the
each so
Saints
far.
game. And then now it's like on the ground floor. It's like that is the perfect analogy of just like where we are with Jordan Love. And it doesn't speak necessarily to his ability or like I guess all aspects of his performance because of like the caveats are just so many because of injuries and because of the state of the wide receiver corps. But like, yeah, that you hit it on the head with that.
Yeah. So to me, that's the biggest thing. That's what they got to find out. And you just want progress. Like the fact that he's throwing interceptions, obviously you don't want that, but like it's going to happen too. Like we guys kind of got to accept that to a degree. But the mistakes we saw against the Raiders game, we can't see in week 7. We can't see in week 10. Like once mistakes happen, and there's going to be a lot of them, we've seen a lot of them, like those have to be fixed because on the other side of it, he's a first time starting quarterback. Yes, but it's year 4 in the system. Like the whole reason you sit a quarterback, for 1 or 2 years, let alone 3, is that the learning curve is shorter. Doesn't mean it's not going to be this smooth ride or not going to be hiccups, but what you're hoping to accomplish with that is it's not this long arch. It's kind of, it's quicker. And I think that standard has to be held in place as well because he's not a rookie. He's an inexperienced quarterback, but he's not a rookie. And to me, those are two different things that we also have to balance as well in looking at his performance, his evaluation. So you give him the grace to make mistakes because it's going to happen. It's hard playing quarterback in the NFL, but they have to be fixed. We just can't. Matt LaFleur talks about all the time. I'm sure a lot of coaches do. Can't make the same mistake twice. Learn from it, figure out what went wrong, and improve from there. So to me, biggest thing is just progress from Jordan Love. That's what we're looking for. That's really what this season hinges on. And then secondary to that would be who's the core moving forward? Like which guys do we got in 2023 that we can build around this group in 2024 and beyond?
Yeah, I think seeing a bunch of plays replicated from the Raiders game would be obviously bad. Like watching, I think that's a great point that you made, that an inexperienced quarterback isn't a rookie quarterback. But I think it was week 1 or possibly week 3 when Bryce Young was playing the Falcons, he made 2 of the exact same throws to Jesse Bates that were interceptions at terrible times. It's like, yeah, that is a rookie mistake because it was the same exact throw to the same exact person to the same route. Like that just can't happen for someone like Jordan Love. And I think learning from the first Spillane interception where he just clearly didn't see him. Like, okay, I understand that I got to look for him now and check that spot of the field before we make that throw. That is a big part of their offense. Or the second Spillane interception where he tried to force it into Christian Watson. I saw a tweet. It's like, Jordan Love isn't a good enough quarterback to make that throw. And if he was, he wouldn't have made that throw because Christian Watson was just so covered by Marcus Peters. And so I think that's a great point, is just that I think it's encouraging to think about that. I think of the interceptions that he's thrown, and they've either been tipped and picked off, which I rarely blame on the quarterback, or like single points of mistakes. There hasn't been any replica interceptions like, oh, he threw that last week. It's the same exact result that happened.
Yeah, like we've, again, going back to like the arm talent, the the 4th down play against Atlanta, the incomplete pass to Samori Toure, like Matt LaFleur said, there's 5 quarterbacks in the league who can make that throw. And for the coach to come out publicly and say that, to me, that says a lot about that throw. You know what I mean? Because I'm sure you would heap that praise on him in the film room, but just to put that out there, especially in a game that they lost and, the blew the lead in the 4th quarter, but like to kind of put that out there of like, this is a top 5 throw, or there's not that it's a top 5 throw. There's only 5 guys in the NFL who can do what Jordan Love just did there. Like, again, we've seen those glimpses. It's just about the consistency and, raising the floor. Like, again, the Raiders game cannot happen again this season.
Right. I'm ready to press the 10th button in that elevator and start rising. So, all right, Paul, that's really all we had for your question wise. We really appreciate you coming on talking Packers with us this bye week, and hopefully, like you said, it goes a little better the rest of the way. Where can the people find you?
Hey, I just want to say I really appreciate you guys having me. I had a lot of fun here with you. But follow me on Twitter at Paul_Bretl. Find all my work over at Packers Wire. You can find me on YouTube as well. Paul Bretl. Hit subscribe. I appreciate it.
Perfect. Yeah, go follow Paul. He's writes a lot of good stuff, does a lot of good work. We and Jordan are great fans. So like I said, thanks for coming on. For all you GSPN listeners, GSPN.info for all your things, Eurostep Podcast Network, like we talked about. I guess we talked about pre-pod. Sunday is officially the beginning of Freaky Time for the Bucks, so go check out all the Bucks feed and be sure to be on the lookout for Brewers content once they decide to recover from their therapy of that loss and everything else. So appreciate you guys listening. We'll be back for the preview of the Broncos game next week, so you'll hear from us soon enough. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.